All right, welcome into Double Fries No Slaw. I am running this thing solo today. Richie taking a little bit of time off. He's out of town with some family, and Harlan was out of town all week last week. So if this is clunky or if this sucks, blame me because I'm the only one here today. So talked a little bit about the scrimmage with some folks that were there, actually somebody on staff, and some pros, some cons. Let's talk about that a little bit, talk about a big change that I think FSU probably leans towards soon, and then get into one other topic and get out of here. It may not be super long, but hopefully you enjoy this. We will jump kind of right into things and appreciate BetUS TV, Guthrie's, Garnet and Gold, all the regulars that we normally shout out. We'll get to them in a little bit. We'll start with Guthrie's. Appreciate them, as always, for their support. I went to a baseball tailgate this week. Shout out the Animals of Section B. Had a fun time there, although the baseball team didn't do great this weekend. Still had a good time at the tailgate. Took a bunch of Guthrie's by there. And that might have to be a regular thing now because there's nothing like – so on game days in the fall, when we pick up chicken and take it to a tailgate, you wait in traffic. There's usually a delay between like when we get there and when people actually show up for the tailgate. Having the Guthrie's just absolutely fresh under the oaks at Doak, pretty fun, and a really good time out there with the Animals of Section B, and then sat with them for both games, which was a lot of fun. The game itself, not fun, either on Saturday or Sunday, but did have fun out there tailgating with them. But appreciate Guthrie's for hooking us up with that. If you are in town, 1818 West Tennessee, 2550 North Monroe, and then 2870 Apalachee Parkway, make sure that you are stopping by and getting your gut box double fries, no slaw. All right, let's talk about the scrimmage. I'll add something here to the overlay just so that we have it in place. Again, maybe a little bit clunky because it's just me by myself today, but I will give BetUS some love up here, and then we'll get on to talking about the scrimmage. All right, so in full transparency, I think that I know this was the first scrimmage that was open to the media, so I know you've probably already heard and seen things about the scrimmage, gotten some takeaways. I spoke with somebody afterwards that's on staff and just wanted to really get kind of what their feel was. So maybe less of, oh, this is what happened here, this is what happened there. You've probably already read that. You've probably already seen that. We can talk about it some. But I will, the defense continues to win the day, which we told you last week after the first scrimmage that the defense was certainly ahead, and that's certainly something you expect in the beginning of spring. I think that internally there's maybe some frustration with the offense, and I know that's not a real positive or real happy thing to talk about early, but I don't know, just going to kind of keep it real after last year. I don't think we need to sugarcoat things or pretend like everything is all sunshine and roses. They really seem to struggle to push the ball down the field. And, we can put a caveat in that some of the offensive linemen were not playing. You probably had 3 of your starters not playing for a large portion of the scrimmage. You had a lot of wide receivers down, and so that certainly does impact things. Let's not pretend that doesn't. But they really struggle to run the ball up the middle. When they bounce things out, they have a little bit more success, but they struggle to run the ball up the middle. The communication, like almost just the understanding is kind of how it was portrayed to me. The understanding of what needs to happen from a passing perspective just isn't there as much. I don't know if that's just confusion with reading zones, reading defenses. If the defense maybe is playing out of their mind, I don't know. Is the offense really struggling or is the defense really good? That's what's maybe hard to tell, hard to really put a finger on which side it is. It's probably a little bit of both. The defense playing a little bit better. They're really excited about the defensive backs. They like some of the defensive line. So with every con, there's probably a pro that you can throw in as well. But just the understanding, the grasping of some things, I don't know if it's completely there yet, right? And so it is very early in spring. That's not like a let's hit the panic button, everything's going to hell or anything like that. But I do think early in spring, you're kind of thinking, all right, this needs to start to catch on soon. And you've got a long way until Alabama comes to town. This is not a meltdown or a panic or anything like that. But I do think after a season like last year, when there are concerns, you should probably speak up about them. And I think some of those concerns exist, not necessarily ready to scrap everything and just throw your hands up. I think that at times, what was described to me as Castellanos just had to throw up some prayers, hoping that something would happen downfield. I mean, you've seen the pick by Arno, or the breakup by the big play by Arno that they put out, where he just doesn't get the ball high enough for a guy that's, your tallest player on the field. You need to get better with that. I do think that that's something that, just needs to get better. And you'd rather those mistakes be happening now so that they can hopefully be corrected going forward. I will say a pro of Castellanos that was described to me as, and this may have been talked about other places and stuff. I've been in Tallahassee all weekend, so I haven't really had a chance to read much, but he absolutely gets after it. And he is more of that vocal leader that I think Florida State wants. I think there's pros and cons to that. If you're winning, guys respond really well to that. If you're losing, guys start to just, it creates kind of an issue within the locker room, right? And so I think that there's good and bad there, but, for going from the quiet, mild-mannered DJ Uyunglele, you've got a complete opposite in that. And, it seems pretty natural. The guy described it to me as it's not forced. Like Castellanos is not doing that just to be the guy that's in people's face. But I do think that there is a pretty big difference there. And hopefully that can rally some people. Would like to see Castellanos read the defense a little bit better. I think from a staff perspective, they want him to be able to read what's going on a bit better. We'll see kind of what they're able to do when they have maybe more of a full complement of offensive line, more of a full complement of wide receivers. You kind of have to take everything on offensive struggles with a grain of salt with that many guys out. Glenn was just okay. Nothing, I wouldn't say anything to really write home, incredible or terrible on that. Just, I think that there's a decent gap between where Castellanos is and Glenn is. I don't think that surprises a ton of people. For the second scrimmage in a row, Kevin Sperry had the best day again, and don't know that was even close. Again, everything with a grain of salt, trying to be very real on some of these things. He also is running with, twos, threes, playing against worse defenders. So, that is factored into that. They really like their starters on defense. And so that is part of it. But again, just being real and not trying to be super. I feel like everything's super negative. I'll try and get more positive on the defensive side of things. I don't think it's a great sign that Kevin Sperry is your best quarterback 2 scrimmages in a row. Guy that's been on campus just a couple of months versus, guys that have been in college for 4 and 5 years. I think that is maybe a bit of a red flag peeking up. You'd hope that by the end of spring, certainly the beginning of fall, Castellanos and Glenn as well are beating him out on a lot of things. I don't think Kevin Sperry is anywhere close to starting or taking, I'm not trying to paint that as a picture, but I do think that your true freshman that's been on campus just a couple of months, beating out the guys that you're likely going to have starting and playing the most snaps is not the best sign in the world. It's a great sign for Kevin Sperry. It's a great sign for maybe that was a really good take by Florida State, and maybe it was better to get Sperry than it was to get Tramell Jones anyway. Yeah, I mean, you can look at it in that light and say that was a really good take, but I do think that you ideally want your starter to be beating out your true freshman in 99% of scenarios, maybe 100. I heard Gunnar Hansen got a little bit banged up. Not sure how long or how bad it was. I don't have any kind of intel on that, but I did hear he got banged up at one point during the scrimmage. First team offensive line, even with the injuries, the guys that were in there played fairly well. And I think they liked what they saw out of the first team offensive line. They're high on the defense, and so they're especially high on the defensive line, and Darrell Jackson and Williams and McCray. And so I think it's a good look that the offensive line, for the most part looked pretty good. Keziah Holmes probably got the most carries. He certainly looked better than anybody else at running back. Again, maybe struggled to get the ball up the middle much when they bounced it outside. A little bit more success there. Again, grain of salt with some guys injured on the offensive line, with the defensive line being as good as they think it might be. You kind of understand struggling to run up the middle. I mean, hopefully nobody can run up the middle on Florida State's defensive line, but again, Alabama's offensive line and running backs are certainly going to test him week one. Elijah Moore probably had the best day, according to my source, as a wide receiver. Lewayne McCoy was okay. Quarterback struggled at a good bit, and so not sure how much you can read into what the wide receivers did. You were down so many wide receivers between Squirrel White and Deuce Robinson, just so many guys out that young guys had to step up. I think that Elijah Moore was probably your standout there. A lot of people will ask about Hakeem. I don't know. I don't know that is panning out the way that Florida State fans at one point wanted it to, thought that it might, and we'll see what the long term is there. Camden Fryer made a couple of plays that I thought people were pretty excited about. Linebackers covered it seemed so talk about the tight ends real quick, and then I'll get to Hunter super chat and then go on to defense. But linebackers seemed like there was a really big emphasis on not letting the tight ends get off. The tight ends had a really nice day last week, and so it seemed to be really a focus there. And so nothing really stands out on the tight ends, but the linebacker play was good. We'll talk about them in just a minute. All right, we'll talk about defense in just a minute. Hunter says, is Kevin Sperry the next Jameis? Hope everybody's good, TJ. Appreciate you, Hunter. Hunter must have hit a bet. Hunter only hits us up when there's a bet hit. Appreciate you, Hunter. I guess we are supposed to play this.
You a recruit and you ain't going to Florida State. What you doing?
I don't want to talk about recruiting on this because I'll just get depressed, and I feel like I've just railed on that forever. But I'm just going to will recruiting to happen at Florida State by continuing to play that Jalen clip. So, Hunter, I appreciate you. Just again on offense, not the best day, but defensively better. Again, you're weighing, was the defense really good? Is the offense just terrible? It makes the defense look good. I don't know, probably somewhere in the middle of that. The offense slow to start spring. Hopefully things improve. Darrell Jackson, again, good day. He's doing everything they want. Pretty physically imposing. Continues to make plays. McCray had a really nice sack that I heard, got people pretty fired up, pretty hyped up. So hopefully you can have a really good tandem or a really good kind of threesome. No pun intended on, McCray, Jackson, and Williams as your defensive line. I think they like other guys that are rotating in there as well, but a really solid front there for Florida State on the defensive line. Omar Graham, Herring had a good day. AJ Cottrell had a good day, I thought, at linebacker. But Omar Graham, his kind of rise, his kind of transition from where he was to where he is now, really, really impressive. He was a kid that, after the Georgia Tech game last year, didn't think that he should probably ever see the field again. And, he may kind of make a rise to be one of your better defenders this year. Linebacker play I heard was really good. They filled holes well. They did a good job making things tough for the running backs and the offensive line, trying to get stuff off the middle. Again, playing an offensive line that's a little bit banged up, but I do think it's a good sign. And maybe that 3-3-5 that they're playing some is kind of providing some advantages in understanding run fits and understanding how to get up the field and really limit rushing attacks, which Florida State needs to do. They were obviously absolutely putrid against the run last year. Shamar, Arno, the story of the scrimmage, I've heard that, may have been targeted 5 times and seemed to break every single one of those up. He was really, really good. And they said if he, my guy said if he was to play like that through the rest of spring and fall, he's going to end up playing a ton. Maybe, I don't know if he'll start or not, but just absolutely on a different level. He does some things that he needs to clean up, some technical things. He's a little bit handsy, he's a little bit, but like his talent is off the charts, and just he didn't allow anything his way and was really, really good. Probably the best player in the scrimmage on Saturday. Charles Lester looked really good. KJ Kirkland, really good. I continue to hear Earl Little's name a lot. Hopefully he translates that to in-game stuff, and is not just, I'm not saying he is, but you want to see him translate it to game stuff and not just kind of be a guy that balls out in practice and then doesn't put it together for 60 minutes on Saturday. But I thought Earl Little was a name that was heard about a lot, and somebody that I think people were really excited about the way that he played for now a second scrimmage in a row. And then Jabril Rawls was the last name that was mentioned. Heard that last week just quickly on the kicking, Weinberg was really, really good this week. I think he was 5 of 7, 5 of 8, somewhere in there. But his misses are really, really close. Had one miss that wasn't very good, but his misses are close. One may have hit the post or hit the upright, and another one was really, really close. May have nicked it too. But his power is really, really legit. Just got to obviously continue to make sure the accuracy is really good. Biggest takeaway is, again, is the defense as good as we think, or is the offense struggling so much that it makes the defense look good? Or is the offense fine and the D is just, maybe a little bit better than we think early? I mean, I don't know how you would ever know that, right? This early into spring, this early into the year. Injuries certainly playing a factor. The offense is fairly banged up when you have that many wide receivers out, when you have that many offensive linemen out, and you're having to shuffle guys in. It's certainly a real concern. But, I mean, injuries happen in the season too. And so you got to figure that out, right? That's why depth matters and depth is important. Those are things that Florida State's got to clean up. And I expect a lot of these guys back. I don't think a lot of people are hampered for the year or anything like that, but you do need guys to get back. You gotta be more healthy, and they'll be really protective of guys through the rest of spring. There's really no reason to push guys now. It's what you do over the summer and fall that means the most. But overall, I don't think that there's a ton of, just insane concern. I do think there's some all right, we gotta get this offense moving, because I don't think it's anywhere close to as disjointed as last year's offense was, but I mean, you got to get to where you're scoring 27, 28 points a game if you want to win games, right? And so last year you were around 13. You got to find a way to double that. We'll keep you updated on other things that we hear out of practice, other things we hear out of scrimmages. Hopefully that's not super doom and gloom, but just kind of passing along what has been told. Not going to hype up something that we don't think needs to be hyped up. Are you going to watch the national championship tonight? That's a good cut right there, right at 17 minutes. But are you going to hate watch it? Man, Auburn really let me down. I'll tell you who really let me down was Texas Tech a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago. I never thought Auburn was going to win, even up like 8 at halftime. They're choke artists, but I think Auburn lost like 3 of their last 4 games in the regular season, then obviously lost to Tennessee in the SEC championship. But Texas Tech is who really let me down, and I'm hoping that another Big 12 team can find a way to knock UF off tonight. If you do go bet on it, I saw Florida's a 1.5 favorite over at BetUS. Are you taking the over? Are you taking the? Here's the thing: if it goes over 140 points, I think Florida wins. If it stays lower scoring and the teams are in the high 60s, low 70s, then I think Houston will take it. But, I mean, classic matchup of offense versus defense, and a lifelong Cougars fan here. Double fries, no slaw. All right, I think Florida State's going to make a pretty big change here soon. I went up this weekend, and maybe you can tell, but certainly got some sun while I was out there. I don't know if spring games are ever coming back to Florida State. I thought what they did this weekend, and I know that football is king, and I know that's why you tuned in this morning and all those other things, but I don't think that they're going to go back to a spring game. Was up in Tally again this weekend, and there was just a ton going on from Thursday to Sunday. I want to say there were 2 women's tennis matches. There was one men's tennis match, 3 baseball games, 3 softball games, 5 beach volleyball matches, and then beach volleyball actually had a tournament going on that ended up, I think there were like 16 total games, but our team played in 5 of them. But there were 7 or 8 different colleges on campus, from Texas to LSU to USF, South Carolina, FAU was there, and a few more. And so the campus was incredibly busy. The town was incredibly busy. I talked to people that were trying to get seats at Madso or trying to get seats at other places down there in College Town, and it was just insane to try and even get in. All the hotels were essentially, the hotel prices were close to spring game prices too. And I think this weekend was really, really successful for FSU. I can talk about the actual sports and what happened there in just a minute, but just from a marketing perspective, from a number of people on campus perspective, from just the way that the events flowed and stacked on top of each other, you could literally go from a beach volleyball match at 10 a.m. over to the softball game at noon, and then baseball starts at 3 or however it worked out every single day. You could really take in all of it. And there were some things stacked where you obviously couldn't make everything. but I probably went to, 10 different events this weekend across the entire weekend. And I understand, I'd love to know, and I'll try and chat with Florida State about this, but I'd love to know kind of what their total attendance was for everything, because it seemed like everything I went to was absolutely packed. And obviously softball was taking on the number 25 team in the country. The girls are a top 10 team. Beach volleyball is a top 10 team. I think they took on 2 other top 10 teams and then 2 other ranked teams as well. So you've got really good matchups. I think you look at women's tennis played a top 40 team. Men's tennis is a top 20 team. And so there, you've got good programs, good athletics going on at all these different places. And I think that you got more, I try to think of how to say this. You almost got more touch points by doing, what did I just mention? 5, 6, 7, 8, and say 14 different events across a weekend than you would for 1 2-hour scrimmage. I want to say that for a really good spring game, Florida State expects around 20 to 25,000 people. And you're certainly going to get less when you don't have football as the main thing. But I think that if you added up the number of people that were all at all the events, you're probably looking at similar numbers. If Florida State would have had a spring game this year, how many people do you think would have gone? I mean, just being fair, like not trying to be super negative or whatever. This is more of a positive update, but maybe 15,000. I mean, you certainly had more than 15,000 people at all the events this weekend. When you consider, how many baseball had for all 3, the first 2 games being sellouts, softball's sold out. I know the first game, probably the second as well. Sundays are always a little bit less attended when you think about all the people that were on campus for beach and for the tennis matches as well. I think you certainly had more than 15. I don't know if you had up to 20 or 25. I'll try and get more numbers on that as we go. But I do think that this was really, really successful. I think the event was really, really well put on. It gave people a chance to see more things. And if they do something like this next year, which I would anticipate they will, I spoke with some people there and would anticipate they do. I think it's a better event than just a 2-hour scrimmage. And I know that football is still king. I know that that's what people care about. I know that that's what excites the most people. I'm not telling you to start caring about, tennis and beach volleyball and softball and baseball more than football. Like, that's not the point at all. But just the chance to get around and make more of a weekend out of it. So many people come up for the spring game and stay for 3 or 4 hours to tailgate, 2 hours for the game, and then just go home, because it's kind of at a convenient time, right? If the spring game starts at 2 and is done by 4, you can be home almost anywhere in the state, right? Even if you're going down to Miami, you can be home before bedtime, right? And if you're going less than Miami, maybe you're going to Tampa or Jacksonville or Orlando, you can be home in 2, 3, 4 hours. And so I think a lot of people do go home afterwards if they're not drinking crazy. And so it creates more of a weekend as opposed to just one event that you go to and you're done with. Also, the way that Florida State under Mike Norvell has done spring games, I absolutely hate. I hate the fact that it's basically just a drill session, right? It's not even it's barely a scrimmage. Maybe if we had an actual game, I'd feel differently. But I think the best option, if we're going to do anything, which Norvell hasn't really had to comment on, the portal tampering stuff and all these other excuses that coaches have for spring games, he got to basically just be shielded by the renovations. I think if you were going to do any kind of a spring game again, you would build it around a weekend like this. So maybe you do your spring game at noon on Saturday, but then you stack everything else. You have a softball game at 4, and you have beach volleyball before all of that in the morning, and you have a baseball game Saturday night, so it's 7 or 8 o'clock, and you can kind of build out the same weekend you had, but still have football. Now, I will say from a logistical standpoint, it's probably harder to put on a football scrimmage and then do all that other stuff the same weekend. I know that becomes kind of for Seminole Productions and other things that are happening, I know that probably becomes more difficult. But if Florida State does this again in the future, which I think they will, I would certainly encourage you to go. You may hate it. You may say like, oh, this wasn't for me. But just being able to take in a ranked baseball series, a ranked softball series, a bunch of ranked matchups in other sports, and be able to see it all and really enjoy an entire weekend, not just go up for a 2-hour drill session. I thought that was really, really cool. Again, I know a lot of people only care about football. Maybe you care about basketball a little too, or baseball as well. But really being able to take everything in at once, to me, I'm a fan of a lot of these other sports too. I really like softball. I really like taking my kids to beach. I really like taking my kids to baseball. So, I'm probably biased here, but I thought it was more enjoyable than the way that we've done spring games for the last, 4 or 5 years since Mike's been here. Maybe if it was truly a 2 or 3 hour spring game, like we used to do under Taggart or under Jimbo or whatever, maybe I'd feel a little bit different. But the way we do spring games now versus the way that they put on this Seminole Sports Weekend, I thought this blew that out of the water. It was so much more fun. You got to do so much more stuff. It was truly a weekend, not just a 2 or 3 hour experience up in Tallahassee. And so if they do this again, when they do this again, you should go check it out. Use sunscreen like I did not, but it was a lot of fun. So that's my plug for the weekend. Was really, really good. Softball won their series. I'll just quickly go through results. Softball won their series 2-1. They were down 7-1 in game 2 and came all the way back to win 9-8. And then they won the series yesterday in run rule fashion. Baseball won the first game on a walk-off, dropped the next 2 by run rule. I saw they dropped from like 5th to 8th or 9th in the rankings. Yeah, you can't get blown out 2 games in a row. A lot of issues with Florida State's bullpen right now. Hopefully they can get that figured out. They play Florida on Tuesday. I think I'm going to that game in Gainesville. If any of you guys are going, let me know. Beach volleyball won 4 of their 5 matches. They lost a top 10 matchup to Texas, who they had beat earlier in the year. They beat top 10 LSU and then swept on Saturday. They beat USF, I think FAU and South Carolina on senior day. And then women's tennis split their matches. They lost on Thursday, won on Sunday against, I think they're ranked around the 70s, and they beat Wake Forest, who's ranked like 36. That was a big win for them. And then men's tennis beat Louisville. So overall, a successful weekend. I know baseball struggled, and that's kind of the headliner for a lot of people, but overall, a pretty successful weekend for all the teams that competed there in Tallahassee. All right, last thing, and I'll wrap up with this. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Just kind of a quick update this morning since we didn't go live yesterday. This is a good question here, Daryl. I don't know. Florida State going through a ton of injuries in spring. I don't know, man. I'll save that for another segment, but your question is certainly noted. And then Rick's got the answer in the chat, Daryl, or at least what a lot of people want to blame. So, all right, last thing. Well, let me give Garnet Gold some love. Again, before we move on, I did stop by Garnet Gold. I got a pair of shorts. Make sure that you are stopping by Garnet Gold or shopping online. Listen, if you go follow them on social media, we usually give you the code NOSLAW, NOSLAW, but right now they've got a 20% code that I don't have right in front of me, but if you go follow them on social media, it's posted everywhere. It's like a spring code that's 20% off. Go check them out. Make sure you're shopping with Garnet and Gold. We appreciate them for always supporting us. Speaking of support, this was the best thing that I've seen this last week, other than, this is the best thing I've seen in the last week. I'll say that. Let's start that over just so that I can clip it better. Speaking of support, this is probably the best thing I saw over the last week. On Monday of last week, I believe it was Monday, Lonni Alameda, Florida State softball head coach, announced that she had been diagnosed and was undergoing treatment with and for breast cancer. She tweeted, "I'm so thankful for all of your support and could not be in a better situation than I am with TMH, Florida State Athletics, and my team and staff. I'm ready to go through this journey together." She had a video as well. You can go check her social media for that. She said later, absolutely overwhelmed with the outpouring of support, kindness, text, email, social, and calls. The passion humans have for each other is incredible. Today wasn't easy sharing, but I have so many behind me and I feel larger than life. Thank you times a million. The outpouring of support, obviously not only from Florida State folks, but I mean, here's a picture of Florida. They, you play them on Wednesday night. They wore pink, and there's Florida's head coach, Tim Walton, wearing pink in support of Coach Almeida. That's just incredible, right? Like for your biggest rival to come into town and there really be a lot of support. There's UNC wearing the braid. That one is NC State. Just all the ACC programs just across the country. Duke wearing the Lonni Alameda braid with the breast cancer ribbon. I believe that is East Texas A&M. So cool to see them supporting. That's Florida Gulf Coast. that you see on the screen right now. Just a ton of support all over the place, and that's really cool to see. Obviously, there's UVA, who Florida State played this weekend. So much outpouring of support, so much love, which is really dope to see. There's Syracuse and their matchup with Georgia Tech. Excuse me. That is, I think that last one's Louisville tweeted what their support. They were one of the first ones that we saw, and to put that in the home plate dirt was really cool. I take it back. I think that one's FGCU. I don't know who the other one was a minute ago that I mentioned, but I do think Lonnie's a great coach, and Florida State's having a great season. The last few weeks. I mean, they had one loss against Virginia here this weekend on Friday night, but a couple of weeks ago, they got bumped down a little bit in the rankings, and they went on the road to beat a ranked University of Alabama team, and then sweep Duke, who was ranked ahead of them as well in a lot of the polls. And then this week, they also got dropped in the rankings. They upset the number 2 team in the country in Florida, and then won a series against number 25 Virginia. So not only are they a really good team that does things the right way, they continue to make regionals and super regionals, and have made Omaha more than most teams out there, with the exception of Oklahoma. They continue to do a really, really good job over the last decade, and have a national title in that span as well. Not only has she built just an incredible program, the amount of people that support her. I mean, I saw several alums back at Florida State this weekend that were coming back just to kind of give support to her and finding their way back so that they could see her and support her, because not only has she built a great program, she's a great person. And so it's cool to see. Obviously, it's awful what she's going through, and this is not Florida State's first time going through this. Obviously, Coach Brooke Wyckoff of the women's basketball team has gone through this as well. But, you always support people that are going through this. I mean, it could be your worst enemy, and you're going to, wish for the best in their journey through something like this. But I do think that it's pretty impressive to see the way that the entire softball community, from your biggest rival 2 hours down the street to all these other ACC teams you're playing, to the program you're playing against, UVA coming to town and losing a series on the road in Tallahassee, one that it felt like they had won on Saturday. It's really special to see, so much support for Coach Alameda. We've had her on the show several times, and whether she's talking about, we had her on right after, they beat LSU in the super regionals to go to the World Series a few years ago, or whether it was, after tough losses, before big games, talking about just Coach Bowden randomly or whatever. She's brought players on and stuff. She's always been gracious with her time. She's always been really good to us. She's always done a great job of anytime, I've been around or anything. She always says hello or always acknowledges. I mean, there's always a huge crowd, so she tries to kind of stay out of some of that stuff. But I think that it's really special to see all of the support, and it is a good reminder of, hey, you guys tuned into this today so we could talk about sports, and so that we could talk about, entertainment and just kind of having fun, goofing off with sports, and, hoping our teams get better or whatever. It is the reminder of what's so much bigger. And, nobody in the ACC, and certainly not Florida, wants to support Lonni Alameda on the field, because they want to beat them. But when it comes down to it, and it comes down to something being so much bigger, they are willing to put all of that aside because of the person that she is, because of what she's meant to the sport. And I really do think, like, when I think we've had every coach at FSU on, outside of the new lacrosse coach and the new track coach. When you just truly think about, genuine good people, and people that are just always positive, always filled with so much love, and just, again, I don't know any other way to say it, but just good people. Lonni Alameda comes to the absolute top of the mind. And it's so impressive to see, in her time of great need, so many people reaching out and outpouring and being that kind of light to her, and her reaction to it has always been, one of graciousness and gratitude. And, we certainly send all of our best wishes, all of our best thoughts, and know that this is just going to be another win that she notches, as she has so often at FSU. So that's what we'll wrap up with today. Again, appreciate you guys for tuning in. I know this was just kind of a quick update here on a Monday morning, because we didn't go live yesterday because I was in Tallahassee. Thinking of Richie and Harlan, as they are both out of town and have been out of town and busy. And we'll be back next Sunday with a regular show at, I don't know, sometime Sunday afternoon. We'll see what's going on. But until then, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. We appreciate Guthrie's Garnet and Gold, BetUS TV for their support, and we will talk to you guys soon. Go Noles.